Hello folks, I'm Trev Makes It Easy, the channel where we make learning easy. In this series, Trev on Econ, I'll be taking you through topics you're likely to run into in any introductory course in economics at the college or university level. My goal is to make economics less scary, more approachable, and, if I can, mildly enjoyable. With that being said, let's make it easy. All right, folks, let's get started. So today we're going to work on the second part of the PPF. Our goal is to take the model we worked on in part one and flesh it out a little bit and give it a little bit more nuance. The first thing we're going to do is we need to talk about the slope of the PPF. Now, the slope of the PPF has quite a few different names. It really depends on what textbook you're using or what course you're working with, so check with your teacher. But I often see phrases like marginal rate of substitution. That's probably my preferred one, MRS. Or you sometimes might see marginal opportunity cost, not my favorite, but MOC. They all mean the same thing. Economics has one big weakness, which is a lot of people don't agree on terminology, so we can use things mildly interchangeably. Overall, though, the definition remains the same, and this is the rate at which we trade off one good for another. All right. The idea being that, going back to our last example, as I gave up one thing, I got more of the other thing, right? And vice versa. And the idea is that as I allocate resources differently, I get different combinations, but that necessitates that I give up something to get more of something else. Now, what's going to happen here is that the PPF can take a number of different shapes. So we're going to work on two. So the first one we've actually already seen. The first one, we'll use a nice blue today, I think. The first one looked like this, and this is the one we're used to seeing. And we know a couple things about graphs that look like this. The first one is that this has a linear slope, right? And one of the nice things about linear slopes is that it has a constant slope, meaning that I could calculate the slope at any point on this graph, and I would get the same number. It doesn't matter if it's up here, down here, wherever, I'm going to get the same value. And what this means is that the rate of trade-off doesn't change, right? If I have to give up one of good A to get two of good B, well, it doesn't matter how many I have of either. Every time I want to get two more of good B, I have to give up one of good A. That ratio stays the same. Now, it doesn't have to be 1-to-1. It could be 1-to-2, 2-to-3, I don't know, 1-to-70. It could be all sorts of random things. But it stays the same all the time. And this is why it gets the name constant marginal rate of substitution, because, well, the name of the slope is the constant marginal rate of substitution, and it's constant, so hence the name constant. All right. Now, again, the idea here is that the slope is the same no matter what. The problem with that is that this is not very realistic, because we know that as something becomes more scarce, the price of that thing changes, right? So, for example, try and get those vaguely the same size. For example, when I'm up in this area of the quadrant, well, I have a lot of good Y, but I have very little of good X, which means that, to me, Y is kind of meaningless, but X is a little more rare, right? And that's going to change. The price up here is probably not the price we're going to see down here. And that's what gives it a very unique shape. And that unique shape looks like this. Actually, I want blue. There we go. Wow, that is not a great one. Oh, that's a much better one, right? We get this curved shape. And when we get a curved shape, we often will describe this as a curved slope, all right? Some might call this concave, is probably the word that textbooks are likely to use. And what's interesting about this is that the slope is changing, right? If I check the slope up here, so if I take, let's say, a little red line and draw a slope, it's pretty flat, right? And then if I drag it down to here, it's a little steeper. If I drag it down to here, it's very steep. So the slope is constantly changing. In fact, not only is it changing, it's getting steeper. And when things get steeper, we have a name for that. All right. So slope gets steeper, which means slope is increasing specifically. All right. And why this matters is because this more accurately reflects reality. Because what this says is the rate of trade-off increases as scarcity changes. Meaning that the more or less we have of a good, the different value we put on it. All right. You'll sometimes hear in economics something called the diamond water paradox, which is the idea that diamonds are not very useful, but they're very valuable because they're scarce, where water is very useful but not so valuable from a monetary standpoint because it's so abundant. That's kind of reflected here, this idea that as something is more scarce, it commands a higher price, and as something is less scarce, it's less of a price. What we're left with is increasing marginal rate of substitution. This is the one that better reflects reality. Now, it's very common for people to look at this and say, hey, you've got constant, you've got increasing, what about decreasing? Okay. I'm going to draw decreasing quickly and explain to you why we don't talk about decreasing. And the reason really is it just can't exist in our reality, right? A decreasing marginal rate of substitution would look something like this. It would be convex, meaning it goes like that. Without getting too much into mathematics here, the problem is this is what's called an asymptotic function, meaning it's never going to hit zero. It's going to get really, really close, but it's just going to keep getting smaller and smaller. And what this boils down to is basically saying the more you buy of something, the cheaper it gets, which then leads to, well, if I buy more, it gets cheaper forever. Well, I should buy infinity because then it'll be basically zero, or at least very close to zero. The problem is there's nothing in the world that works like that. There's nothing that as I buy more, it gets progressively cheaper forever, because in economics, we really don't like the solution infinity, right? We're dealing with scarcity, which means limitation. So if we're allowing for something to go infinite, well, we have a problem. So we will be sticking to these two. Okay, most courses do. This would be more for advanced economics. Again, the one on the left is fine. It's very good for teaching. The one on the right here, this increasing marginal rate of substitution, this is the one that more accurately reflects reality. All right. Now, the last topic we're going to do with the PPF is talk about movement. And this is something we're introducing here, but we will see it a lot going forward. All right. And we're actually going to go back to a question or a statement we made in the previous video, which is, how do we go beyond the PPF, right? In the last video, we had a point called D, which was beyond the PPF. And we said, which would be nice to get there, but we just can't get there. And then we said, yet. Well, now we have to talk about how we get there. And the way we do this through economic growth, right? Economic growth is going to be a fundamental concept, especially in the macro-focused videos coming up later. But economic growth is simply being able to make more stuff, okay? It's a very plain English definition, but basically, I just want to make more stuff, right? More stuff is good, so therefore, I want to do it. And the question is, how do I do it? So for our purposes at this stage, there are two main ways to grow. Number one is you can get more stuff. Now, again, that's kind of plain English, but get more stuff is basically having more capital, so machinery or equipment, and or labor, more people, all right? If I just have more people making stuff or more machines to make stuff with, I should, in theory, make more stuff, so I grow. The other one is get better stuff. All right. Again, the more technical definition is we improve technology. Technology is kind of a strange word in economics. It does mean things like electronics, computers, etc. But technology can be a whole lot more encompassing. Usually we also throw on the word processes because things like how you organize your resources or how you structure them, etc., those can also be ways of improving technology and getting better stuff. You can think of option one as like bringing more people onto the team. You can think of option two as taking the team you already have and educating them more or giving them more experience or training. And that is going to pay dividends. All right. So the question is, well, how does that impact our picture? Let's clean this up a bit here. Kill that off, scoot this up. My mouse is acting a little weird today, so bear with me. All right. So I'm going to set up 3 graphs, if I can draw straight. And we're going to keep it simple. We are going to use that constant returns version. So I'm just going to make a baby graph like this, and we're going to pick 2 goods. I'm going to pick guns and butter. All right. Seems like a very odd thing to choose, but this model was initially used to discuss wartime, where the idea would be, oh, if you have butter, you need that in times of peace because people need to eat, but you don't need guns in times of peace. And then it said, well, what about in war? In war, you still need butter, but you also now need guns. How do you deal with it? It was an interesting concept. So we have 3 pictures because there's effectively 3 things that can happen. Option 1 is both goods grow. Okay, something happens that makes us make more butter and more guns. We can also have just butter grows. Maybe something happens where only butter is affected, and then obviously the final one is just guns grow. All right. So let's talk about what could cause this and what it would do for us. Now, this is a very common thing in economics where we start from a starting point or a reference point, and then some event is going to occur. So let's say in this first case, both goods grow. So I'm thinking, okay, what is going to cause guns and butter to grow? What's going to make more of both of those? Maybe it's immigration. People come into the country. Some people go work in the butter factory or the gun factory. So what's going to happen is, instead of making this much butter, I can make this much butter. Instead of making this many guns, I can make this many guns. And what we end up with is an outward shift. The curve moves outwards and captures all this new area in between. What's interesting about this is stuff that was on the blue line that we used to say was efficient and possible, well, now it's still possible, but it's no longer efficient, right? Efficiency has moved out to the purple line, and that purple line used to not even be attainable. It wasn't possible. So we've shifted outwards, and this helps us tell the story in the graph. This is going to be a very common thing, especially when we get into supply and demand in a few videos. So I want you to get used to this idea of a story is happening or event is occurring, and we want to reflect that in our drawings. All right. So how do we handle if it's just one good? Well, maybe just butter is getting better. Maybe we develop some technology that makes cows produce more milk. Well, all of a sudden, butter is going to shoot up, but guns doesn't do anything for them. So we're going to keep the same point on guns, like so, and we're basically going to get a bit of a rotation. So instead of shifting out, it's more rotating out. All right? Different story, different graph, right? And if you're good with patterns, you might be able to guess the next one, but maybe we invent a new way of pressing guns, a new metal technique. Doesn't do anything for butter, so butter stays the same. But guns, gun scoots out. And again, we're getting kind of a pivoting action here, right? Now, right now we have 3 stories. We have 3 different ways of showing them. We have to remember that economics is always a two-sided coin. If we do something one way, we get a result. If we do something the opposite way, we get the opposite result. So in all these cases, we're talking about the nice case where things are growing. There's also the case where instead of both things grow, both goods shrink. Okay. Again, different words we can use here. Some people use shrink, some people use destroyed. I guess it depends how intense you want to be. But because it's the opposite event, I'm going to get the opposite movement. So growth shifted me out. Shrinkage is going to shift me inward. And I'm getting that opposite movement. You are going to find in economics that most of economics is just do something one way, get a result, do it the other way, get the opposite result, which actually makes it a little easier if you can recognize that pattern, but I find students do struggle with that. So we obviously have just butter shrinks. I don't know, maybe mad cow disease kills off a bunch of cows. We can't make as much butter. So butter shrinks, but the gun market, it's fine. Again, we're going to get this rotational movement. And then finally, what if just guns shrink? Maybe the gun factory exploded, right? You're dealing with munitions. It's a little dangerous. Doesn't do anything to my nice cows, but it does reduce my gun output, right? And again, we're getting that pivot. So you can see this guns and butter example, we came up with 6 stories, all right? That's one of the difficult yet interesting things about economics is you end up with limitless stories and different ways of interpreting them or conveying that message. And then later on, we'll use these graphs that we've created to tell us a little more, to tell us, well, what does that mean? Not only what happened, but what is the effect of that? That wraps up the PPF. Next time we're going to tackle trade. I'll see you then. Bye-bye. Well, folks, that wraps up another lesson for today. I hope it was helpful. If you found the video valuable, please make sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions about the content or requests for other topics or subjects you'd like me to cover, please leave a comment below. Until next time, keep learning and make it easy.